welcome back to the next video in the Game Changers program. In this video, Lauren, we really want to focus in on the fourth quadrant of self that we learnt in a few videos back. A few videos ago, we discussed the four quadrants of self, and what were they? We had body,
mind,
our beliefs, we had our feelings, our soul, and we also had our values, our human spirit and the values that make us who we are, particularly within our emotional health. And so I want to kind of focus in on values in this session. We've got an evaluation that we want to do at the end of this video, and it's going to pave the way for some spotlights that we can do, some short little videos that will scatter throughout the rest of the program, where we can put a spotlight over a particular virtue, a particular human virtue that dwells and lives within our human spirit and is there to govern our behavior, so that we can really start to understand what values are. And it's so interesting, Lauren, because we can value anything, and so that almost makes it really difficult to understand what a value is.
Exactly. You might value your car, you might value your house, you might value money, you might value holidays, you might value relationships. You know, there's all sorts of things we value.
Absolutely. That doesn't make your car a value. And so it's really interesting that we need to really wrap our heads around what values are. So when we use the same word to mean different things, oh look, I really value my car, that doesn't make my car a value. So what is a value? Okay, well, for starters, a value is not a behavior. It governs your behavior. And so a better word for this is virtue, I think. It's a human virtue. And so, for example, we'll do a bit of a spotlight right now, but for example, courage, okay? The human virtue of courage, having a high degree of strength or resolve in the midst or in the face of challenges. Okay, so when you're hit with a challenge in life, you have a high degree of strength and resolve to continue in the face of challenges. So this kind of notion of courage, it's not a behavior. It's not a feeling. Try and feel up some courage right now, Lauren.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying.
You can't. It's not a feeling. Try and think it up. Try and think up some courage.
I'm thinking about courage. It's COURAGE.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So it's not in our mind. It's not something we can think up. And of course, it's not an organ. Or a fat cell, or a bone in our body.
Right.
So
you can't just have a jelly bean and all of a sudden,
absolutely,
the courage.
So it's something else, and it is a value. It absolutely is a value, but we can value things like I see often around when I go around and I run workshops for companies and for teams that work together in various businesses. I'll see that they've got a list of core values, and they might have a value up there that is teamwork, for example. Now, teamwork is something great to value. I value teamwork. I think teamwork is fantastic, but teamwork itself is not a human virtue. It's not a value. It's not something that remains or resides in our human spirit. Okay, it's the outcome of things like cooperation and unity and these great human virtues. And when you cluster these human virtues in a group of people, obviously they start to work together as a team, which is to do with their behavior. How are they behaving? Okay.
Yeah.
Things like efficiency and productivity are all fantastic things for businesses to value, but they're not values, okay? They're someone's output. They're someone's behavior or the behavior of a group. And so therefore, it's not a value. But what's governing someone's productivity? Well, it might be the virtue of commitment and dedication. It might be punctuality. It might be tenacity. And so there's these great human virtues. We've got 56 human virtues residing in our spirit. And this is everyone, Lauren.
We all have them, don't we, to different degrees, though,
absolutely. Well, to different degrees. And so today I want to explain to you that a value is a continuum, okay? A value is a continuum, and there is a range moving from the extreme absence of the value through to a healthy a healthy display of that human virtue in practice, in operation in the person, right up to the excess of that human
like the
virtue.
overbearance of it.
Right.
Where it's everything in moderation, folks. Don't forget that.
And so, to use courage as the example,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
the absence of courage is cowardice.
Yeah.
It's fear. It's, no, I don't want to do that. And I'm sure, Lauren, throughout your life, particularly being born legally blind, you have reached multiple points where you could have chosen the road of cowardice and strengthened that virtue muscle within your human spirit.
That's right.
Strengthened that fear, that cowardly response in yourself.
Well, there has certainly been moments of that cowardice, or perhaps, and I wonder which one is another way of looking at the opposite to courage is discourage, being discouraged as well. And so whether it be cowardice or discouragement, those are certainly elements of my life that have happened. But remember earlier on too when I spoke about adversity doesn't build character, adversity reveals it. In other words, the character, or the courage, should I say, that Josh has just been talking about, it already existed inside me, but it's because of the adversity or the experiences that I've been put through that all of a sudden, hang on, the courage was revealed. It was uncovered within me. And so, I've been able to develop a certain degree of courage in my own life, and certainly other virtues as well. And you'll find the same in your life if you were to look at all these 56 virtues. And a lot of that has become uncovered because of your own challenges, your own life experience that has helped to reveal those to you.
Absolutely. And so, using this notion of courage, this human virtue of courage, obviously which choice you make in certain adversities, in certain circumstances and challenges will determine where on that continuum you grow, where on that continuum you go. So do you move down into the excess or the absence, or do you stay strong in the middle? Well, let's have a look at the excess of courage. The excess of courage, when I've got too much courage, I'm rash and reckless, aren't I, Lauren?
Yeah, you are.
Well, you don't have to tell everyone.
Sorry about that, buddy.
The reality is that fear exists in us to keep us safe, okay? So fear, often we talk about fear as being this really horrible, unhealthy thing, but what keeps me away from the cliff's edge so that I don't fall to my death, plummet to my death, is fear. And so fear is there to keep us safe. Now, the problem with fear is that we can be trying to keep ourselves safe from something that's not really life-threatening and can be causing us hurt and pain in other areas. For example, someone who's been romantically hurt before, not willing to put themselves out there into another relationship out of fear of being hurt. Well, that's at the sake of love, isn't it? It's costing them the opportunity to find someone. So we don't want fear to govern our life. It's not a virtue, it's not a value, it's a feeling. And when feelings begin to govern our behavior, when they start to rule or dictate our choices, we become emotionally unhealthy. So we don't want our feelings governing our behavior. We want our virtues governing our behavior. But the problem with our values continuum is that there are vices on either side. So cowardice, the absence of courage, is a vice. Recklessness, the excess of courage, is a vice. And so we don't want our vices dictating our behaviour either, do we?
No, we definitely do not want that either. We want it to be positive.
Absolutely. We want to be in that narrow path between the vices, that narrow virtue centre. You see, what you'll see on your screens has 3 degrees of vice on either side. So there's a small degree of absence, there's a medium degree of absence, and then there's an extreme degree of absence. And so there's 3 degrees of cowardice there. Likewise, there's 3 degrees of recklessness as well. And so your continuum ends up being split up into 7 sections. And only one of those sections, that narrow path in the middle, is the road of virtue. And obviously, the road of emotional health. Well, when we line all 56 virtues up, we start to see what life can be with, well, we talked about it in the last one, with practice and repetition, with making our limbic system's new norm, new default, the way of virtue, and bringing our values into alignment instead of being out of alignment, zigzagging all over the place from vice to vice to vice. We actually want to live a life of virtue.
What I always find an interesting exercise with virtues like this is to look through these virtues yourself and identify maybe 3 that you feel like, you know what, I actually feel pretty good. I feel like I am in that narrow, that healthy band.
Absolutely.
Through the middle. And they're the ones that I'm really good at. But then ask yourself, what 3 virtues do I maybe need more of? Perhaps I'm at the excess at either end of this.
Right.
And which ones would I like to maybe move a little bit further to the centre?
Yeah.
And I think another one too, a third one, which is always fascinating, I find, is to ask your friend or your husband or wife or partner or family member or someone, hey Josh, which 3 do you think I'm good at?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, giving it that 360 degree, I guess, level of accuracy, isn't it? So not just me assessing myself, but getting an outsider's perspective.
You'll often find that other people see in you things that you don't recognise in yourself. You're like, what? Wow, I didn't realise I had courage. It's like, yeah, too right you do. I noticed when you did this and this and this, and I saw you had courage, and so it's always good to get, other people's
Absolutely. That reminds me of the potential session that we did a number of videos ago, Lauren, where we were talking about the 16 squares, other people being involved in that process because we often can't see our own potential.
That's right.
And so that's great. And also as I guide people on journeys in my emotional health coaching, the one-on-one and Skype sessions that I run with people, I notice that what can be really helpful is reflecting on, particularly when Lauren was talking about the 3 values, the 3 human virtues that you do quite well in, that you are narrow pathing, you're in that narrow path in the middle. Maybe it's commitment, maybe you've been married for 25 years and you're like, you know what, I have to say, as much as I've got flaws and I'm enrolled in this program for growth, I'm a pretty committed person and I've really stuck it out in my marriage through the highs and the lows, and I've remained committed and faithful to my spouse. And so, yeah, you know what? Commitment is one of those virtues I think I'm doing all right in. Well, it's interesting that when we reflect on, well, what made us? What opportunities did life give us? What adversity did life throw at us? And what choices did we make in those key points in our life that made us now really great at commitment? It might have been that there was an opportunity to break up in the marriage and you chose not to. You chose to stick it out. And you can almost attribute that choice as being key on why you are now a committed person. In terms of courage, it might have been some obstacle where you could have bowed out and chosen to be a bit cowardly, but you chose not to operate within cowardice. You chose to operate in the human virtue of courage, and now you are someone that is described as being someone of courage.
It reminds me what we talked about in our last session, Josh, about practice.
Yeah.
Because these virtues do require practice. Like you're saying, once you've made a decision and you've done it and you see some, the positive results of your decision, then it encourages you to keep doing it again, repeating, hey, this worked, I'm going to repeat that again. Right. And particularly if someone acknowledges it too and says, hey, Lauren, that was great, thanks for that. Oh, right, okay, well, I'll keep doing that. Yeah. And it also, I had something else on my mind too, it just passed my mind, Ross, but, just keep practicing.
Absolutely. They are muscles. They may not be physical muscles that reside in our body, like my bicep or my hamstring. They're not physical muscles, but they are spiritual muscles that reside in my character, in my human spirit. And so these virtues are really important and often a part of life that we haphazardly grow and improve in or decline in with no intentionality. So being really proactive and intentional about growing within our human spirit and becoming as healthy as we can in our values continuums, this is key and paramount to growth. So what we're going to move on to right now is, as we draw a close on this video, is we'd like you in your workbooks on the next page to have a look at the values self-assessment. And this is about character mapping. So this is about starting to get an idea and drawing a map of your character. So we've got about 10 or so meta values that almost all the other values can cluster in behind or become the outworking, the byproduct of some of these meta values working together. So these are probably the most important values of the set, the meta values. If you can go through these questions and really start to think, where do I live? Now, this is not what I'm capable of, like my potential. Well, in the right set of circumstances, with the right person on my left, and I've woken up and had a great day, I'm capable of courage, so I'll give myself perfect score on this continuum. And this is about where you usually live. Well, actually, if I'm being honest, although I'm capable of being courageous, I don't really live there. I live in a little bit of cowardice, or I live in a little bit of recklessness. I tend to be drawn to doing things maybe I shouldn't do. So I tend to be a little bit more reckless. So this is about being really honest and starting to draw a character map of who you are in your human spirit.
When you're under a little bit of pressure. What's the default when you're just
Right.
under that little bit of pressure?
Absolutely.
That's where your real character lies, right
Absolutely.
there. Yeah.
So have a think about these. There's a whole range of different values. There's honesty, there's commitment, there's courage. So go through these one by one, give them some solid thought. As Lauren said, ask a friend, a loved one, a family member, someone who knows you well, but also someone who will be honest with you, not someone who's just going to tell you what they think you want to hear. Pick wisely, friends, in who you choose to help you in this, and just really spend a bit of time now being reflective.
Hopefully they're not too brutally honest.
Well, yes,
Off that other end of the continuum.
Absolutely.
Where it just becomes brutal.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
just a nice healthy piece of honesty. That's what all we need.
Absolutely. And just mark down where you are on these meta values and really start to not just think this is not just about a self-discovery journey. It is about self-discovery, but it's also about intentionality. So be asking yourself at the same time, okay, well, now that I know where I am, now what? Okay?
Yeah.
If I've done the what and I've done the so what,
Now it's the...
now what? What am I going to do now that I know where I am on this particular value continuum? Am I going to stay here, or am I going to try and grow? And remember that putting a little cross or a tick in the very center in that narrow path is essentially saying you have no room for improvement. That you live in that particular value fairly perfectly. Now, you probably will nail a couple of those values. You probably are in that virtue center in a couple of the values, but you won't be there in all 10. You certainly probably won't even be in there in half. So it's a matter of going through now and finding your room for improvement. And we hope you enjoy this process.
Yeah, it's a valuable process. So look at this, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of this. You'll find that a lot of the challenges and stresses and issues and defaults that you find in your life, if you looked at these values and virtues very carefully and ask yourself the question, hey, which one of these do I need right now? I can guarantee you that one or two of these virtues is really the solution to the problem that you're facing.
Absolutely.
So have a look at it and evaluate yourself. And if there's one that you want to shift across into that center, let's start working on it now.